I never thought I'd be the villain in my family's story, but life has a way of casting you in roles you never auditioned for. My name is Tessa Mitchell, and 5 years ago, I was just a normal 21-year-old college junior with big dreams and a close-knit family. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. My dad's job as an insurance broker kept us in a modest house in the suburbs of Boston, and my mom worked part-time at a local bookstore to help cover extras. I have 2 younger siblings, my sister Olivia, who's 3 years younger than me, and my brother Max, who's 6 years my junior. We were the kind of family that ate dinner together most nights, took summer road trips to Maine, and argued about whose turn it was to take out the trash. Normal, ordinary, happy. I was studying computer programming at Boston University, living in a cramped off-campus apartment with 2 roommates and dating occasionally, but mostly focused on my studies. I'd always had a knack for technology, for seeing systems and how they could work better. My dad used to joke that I was the family tech support hotline. "Tessa," he'd call from downstairs, "the router's doing that thing again." And I'd roll my eyes but go fix it anyway. He was so proud when I got accepted to BU's computer science program. "My girl's going to be the next Steve Jobs," he'd tell anyone who would listen. That was the before everything changed. Before I became both savior and villain to the people I loved most. It happened on a Tuesday in late October of my junior year. I was sitting in my advanced algorithms class when my phone vibrated with a call from my mom. She never called during the day. She knew my schedule too well for that, so I immediately felt my stomach drop. I slipped out of the lecture hall to answer. "Tessa," my mom's voice was strange, tight, and breathless. "It's Dad. He collapsed at work. They're saying it was a heart attack. They've taken him to Mass General, and I'm on my way there now. Can you come?" The world seemed to tilt under my feet as I leaned against the cold concrete wall of the hallway. Is he okay?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted a beat too long. "Just come, honey. Please come quickly." I don't remember the subway ride to the hospital. I don't remember racing through the sterile corridors, following signs to the cardiac care unit. What I do remember is the sight of my mother's face when I found her in the waiting room, gray and hollowed out, as if she'd aged a decade in an hour. Olivia was beside her, her eyes red-rimmed and vacant, and Max was pacing, his lanky teenage frame vibrating with nervous energy. "Mom?" I said, and when she looked up at me, I knew. "He was gone before the ambulance even got to his office," she said, her voice flat. "They tried to resuscitate him, but—" I don't know who moved first, but suddenly we were all wrapped together, a knot of grief in the middle of that antiseptic waiting room, holding each other as if we might all float away if we let go. The next few days passed in a blur of arrangements, phone calls, and casseroles brought by neighbors. My father had been well liked, and our house filled with people sharing stories and offering condolences. I moved back home temporarily to help my mom navigate the immediate aftermath. There were forms to fill out, accounts to sort through, a funeral to plan. I postponed my midterms, explaining the situation to my professors, who were understanding but firm about making up the work eventually. It wasn't until about 2 weeks after the funeral, when the house had emptied of visitors and we were left with just the 4 of us and our grief, that reality began to set in. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my mom late one night, a spread of papers between us, bills, insurance documents, bank statements. "I had no idea," my mom said, shaking her head as she looked at the mortgage statement. "I knew Frank handled most of the finances, but I didn't realize—" Her voice trailed off as she pushed another paper toward me. It was a life insurance statement. The policy had lapsed 3 months ago. My father, the insurance broker, had let his own life insurance lapse. "There must be some mistake," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I remembered conversations I'd overheard. My dad talking about making cutbacks, about temporary belt tightening. He'd been worried about something at work, but he'd always changed the subject when I asked about it. "No mistake," my mom said, her voice small. "I called them already. We're on our own, Tessa." That night, after my mom had finally gone to bed, I stayed at the kitchen table, combing through everything. The picture that emerged was sobering. Dad's company had been struggling, and he'd taken a significant pay cut the previous year. He'd been dipping into savings to maintain our lifestyle, not wanting to worry Mom or disrupt Olivia's college plans or Max's expensive hockey program. The mortgage was underwater after a refinance gone wrong. There were credit card bills I hadn't known about, and now, without Dad's income and with no life insurance payout, we were in serious financial trouble. I sat there until dawn, making calculations, considering options. My mom had her part-time job at the bookstore, which barely covered groceries. Olivia was at a state school on a partial scholarship, but there were still costs. Max was in his senior year of high school, talking about colleges with good hockey programs, and I had a year and a half left at BU. By the time my mom came downstairs the next morning, I had a plan. I would move back home permanently to save on rent. I'd increase my course load to graduate early while picking up a part-time programming job I'd been offered the previous summer. I'd help Mom find full-time work. We'd sell one of the cars. We'd cut every expense we could. We'd make it work somehow. No, my mom said firmly when I laid it all out for her. Absolutely not. You are not sacrificing your education or taking on our family's burdens. Your father would be devastated. Dad's not here, I said, the words like glass in my throat. And this isn't a discussion, Mom. I'm doing this. We argued, but in the end, practicality won out. There simply wasn't another viable option. So I moved back home into my childhood bedroom with its fading posters and twin bed. I arranged with my university to take some courses online, packed my remaining classes into 2 brutal days a week, and started working 30 hours at a software development company. Every spare moment went to studying or helping around the house, or looking for ways to save money or make more of it. Olivia was upset when we told her she'd need to get a campus job and take out additional loans. Why can't you take out loans instead? She demanded over the phone. Why do I have to be the one to sacrifice? Because I'm already working and supporting the household, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. And because that's the reality of our situation now. Max took the news about cutting back on his hockey expenses even harder. This is my future, he shouted, slamming his door so hard a family photo fell off the wall in the hallway, its frame cracking on the hardwood floor. It felt symbolic somehow. Those first few months were the hardest. We were all grieving, all adjusting to our new financial reality, all resentful in our own ways. Mom took a full-time administrative job at a dental office, coming home each evening with a forced smile and tired eyes. Olivia called less and less frequently. Max retreated into sullen silence, spending more time at friends' houses than at home. And I worked. I studied. I paid bills. I grocery shopped according to sales. I canceled streaming services and negotiated with utility companies. I sold things on eBay, my own stuff at first, then items for neighbors for a small commission. I stopped dating, stopped socializing, stopped doing anything that wasn't productive or necessary. I felt older than my 21 years, hardened by responsibility and the constant gnawing worry about money. But something unexpected happened during that time too. In my advanced software development course, I was paired with Ryan Zhao for the semester-long final project. Ryan was brilliant, quiet and intense, with a mind that could see elegant solutions where others saw only problems. We were tasked with creating an app that solved a real-world problem, and as we brainstormed ideas over coffee in the campus center, I found myself talking about my new home situation. I'm constantly running around turning off lights and adjusting the thermostat to save on electricity, I told him. My brother leaves everything on, and my mom forgets to adjust the settings when she leaves for work. I must save $30 a month just by following everyone around and managing the house. Ryan nodded thoughtfully, tapping his pencil against his notepad. What if you didn't have to physically do that? What if you could control everything from your phone? I shrugged. Smart home systems exist, but they're expensive and complicated to install. Our house is old, and we're definitely not in a position to invest in fancy technology. But what if they weren't expensive or complicated? Ryan persisted, his eyes lighting up the way they did when he was onto something. What if we could create an app that works with inexpensive, retrofittable devices? Something anyone could install, regardless of technical skill or the age of their home. And that was the beginning of HomeSync, though we didn't call it that yet. For weeks, Ryan and I worked obsessively on the project, far exceeding the requirements for the class. We developed a prototype app that could control a network of simple, affordable devices, plug adapters, stick-on sensors, small controllers that could be attached to existing fixtures without complex wiring. The app used machine learning to recognize patterns and make automatic adjustments, learning from the user's behaviors to optimize energy usage without requiring constant manual input. Our professor was impressed, giving us the highest grade in the class and suggesting we enter the university's annual innovation competition. We did, spending our winter break refining our prototype and practicing our pitch. When we won first place and the accompanying $5,000 prize, it felt like the first good thing that had happened to my family in months. "I'm so proud of you," my mom said when I showed her the novelty check and explained the concept. "Your father would have been over the moon." The mention of my dad still hurt, but for once it was mixed with something else, a sense that perhaps I was finding my way forward, that perhaps all the sacrifices might lead somewhere. Ryan and I decided to use the prize money to develop actual prototypes of our hardware devices. We spent months in BU's Innovation Lab, working with engineering students to refine the designs, making them smaller, more efficient, and, crucially, cheaper to produce. We filed a provisional patent application, using money I'd been saving, for a post-graduation apartment as the filing fee. But even as the project progressed, the strain at home intensified. Olivia had to take a semester off when her loans didn't come through on time, moving back home and taking a job at a local restaurant. She resented me for having direction and purpose while her life felt stalled. Max, now in his first year at a state college nearby, his dreams of a hockey scholarship dashed by our financial reality, barely spoke to me, as if I were personally responsible for the downturn in our family's fortunes. "You act like your dad now," he said during one particularly heated argument about household expenses. "Ordering everyone around, controlling all the money, but you're not him. You're just his replacement who doesn't want anyone to have any fun or any life." His words stung because there was truth in them. I had taken on a parental role, out of necessity rather than desire. I was the one who said no to expenses we couldn't afford, the one who enforced the new, stricter budget, the one who worked myself to exhaustion trying to keep our family afloat. I wasn't fun anymore. I didn't have time to be. The turning point came in the spring of my senior year. Ryan and I had been invited to present our now-named HomeSync system at a regional technology showcase. We'd refined our prototype to the point where it was genuinely impressive, simple to install, intuitive to use, and remarkably effective at reducing energy consumption. We'd conducted a small beta test in 20 homes, including my own, and the results had exceeded even our expectations. The showcase was attended by industry professionals, including investors looking for the next big thing. Our presentation went well, but it was the demo that really captured attention. We'd set up a miniature house with real devices installed, and I used the app to control everything in real time, showcasing the learning algorithm that anticipated needs based on patterns of behavior. Afterwards, as we stood by our booth answering questions, a man in an impeccable suit introduced himself as Victor Patel from Nexus Ventures. "I'd like to discuss your technology further," he said, handing us each a business card. "My firm specializes in early-stage investments in smart home technology. Can we schedule a meeting for next week?" Ryan and I looked at each other, momentarily, speechless. This was beyond anything we'd hoped for at this stage. We'd be very interested in talking, I finally managed to say, trying to sound professional despite my racing heart. The meeting with Victor turned into a series of meetings, each more promising than the last. Nexus Ventures was indeed very interested in HomeSync, particularly its accessibility for average consumers and its impressive energy-saving capabilities. They offered us initial funding to develop the product further, with the possibility of a larger investment round if certain milestones were met. The day we signed the preliminary agreement, securing $250,000 in seed funding, Ryan and I stood outside the Nexus offices in downtown Boston, staring at each other in disbelief. "We did it," he said, his usual reserve breaking into a wide grin. "We actually did it." I felt lightheaded, almost delirious. For so long, my life had been about sustaining, about preventing further loss, about just getting by. This was the first time in years I felt like I was moving forward, building something, creating possibility, instead of just managing scarcity. When I told my family about the investment that night, their reactions were mixed. My mom was genuinely happy for me, though I could see worry behind her smile, worry that this new venture would take even more of my time and energy away from home. Olivia, who had returned to college by then but was still struggling, offered a tight congratulations that didn't reach her eyes, and Max just shrugged and said, "Cool. Does this mean we can get cable again?" I tried not to let their lukewarm response dampen my excitement. They didn't understand yet what this could mean for all of us if it succeeded. I didn't fully understand it myself, how completely it would transform our lives, for better and worse. The next 18 months were the most intense of my life. With the initial funding, Ryan and I were able to quit our part-time jobs and focus entirely on developing HomeSync. We rented a small office space, hired 2 engineers and a UI designer, and worked relentlessly to refine our product for market. I completed my degree, walking at graduation with dark circles under my eyes hidden by concealer, my mind already back at the office even as I accepted my diploma. My contribution to household expenses remained steady during this time. I took a minimal salary from our funding, enough to cover my share of bills and help with groceries, but most of the investment went directly into the business. This created additional tension at home. Mom understood the concept of investing in the future, but Olivia and Max saw only that I had access to money that wasn't improving our immediate situation. "So you've got $250,000, but we're still eating ramen 3 nights a week?" Olivia asked during one of her weekend visits home. "Make it make sense, Tessa." "The money isn't mine to spend," I tried to explain. "It's an investment in the company to develop the product. If I diverted it to personal expenses, we'd be violating our agreement with Nexus, and we'd probably fail before we even get to market." Olivia rolled her eyes. "Right, because your precious company is more important than your family." I wanted to shake her, to make her understand that I was thinking of the family, that short-term sacrifices might lead to long-term security for all of us. But I swallowed my frustration and changed the subject. There was no point in another argument that would only leave us both feeling worse. The breakthrough came almost 2 years after my father's death, when HomeSync launched to unexpectedly strong sales and glowing reviews. Our combination of affordability, simplicity, and effectiveness hit a sweet spot in the market. Major tech publications featured us as a top new product. Orders flooded in faster than our small operation could fulfill them. Then, just 3 months after launch, we received the email that would change everything. Intelligent Home Systems, one of the largest players in the smart home industry, wanted to discuss acquiring HomeSync. The negotiations were intense and complex, involving terms and figures I'd never encountered before. We hired an attorney specializing in tech acquisitions, spending a significant portion of our dwindling cash reserves on his fees. Ryan and I spent countless hours in meetings, on calls, reviewing documents, discussing options. In the end, Intelligent Home Systems offered $3.2 million for our technology, patents, and brand. As equal partners, Ryan and I would each receive $1.6 million minus taxes and the repayment of our initial investment. The offer included positions for both of us at IHS, though we would no longer have control over HomeSync's development. It's a good offer, our attorney advised. For a company at your stage, with your current market penetration, it's actually quite generous. You could hold out for more or try to grow independently, but there are significant risks in either approach. Ryan. And I spent a long night at our office, weighing the options. We were both exhausted from the past 2 years of non-stop work. The idea of having corporate resources behind us was appealing, as was the financial security the acquisition would provide. But we'd also be giving up control of our creation, becoming employees rather than founders. What do you think? Ryan asked as dawn broke over the Boston skyline, visible from our small office window. It's your call too. We decide together. I thought about my family, about the strain of the past 2 years, about the constant juggling of responsibilities and the never-ending worry about money. I thought about what an infusion of over $1 million could mean, not just financial, security, but perhaps a chance to repair relationships strained by hardship. Let's take the offer, I said finally. We've built something valuable, something that works. Now let's make sure it reaches as many people as possible, even if that means letting go a little. Ryan nodded, a mix of relief and resignation on his face. Yeah, I think you're right. The acquisition process took 3 more months to complete, during which time I told no one outside our small team and our lawyers. I wanted everything to be finalized before sharing the news, afraid of jinxing it or of raising hopes that might be dashed if something went wrong. Finally, on a crisp October day almost exactly 2 years after my father's death, the funds were transferred to my account. I sat at my desk, staring at the banking app on my phone, at the number with all those zeros after it. After taxes and fees, I had just over $1 million, a sum so large it seemed unreal, disconnected from the concept of money as I'd known it for the past 2 years of careful budgeting and constant sacrifice. That evening, I gathered my family in our living room, the same room where we'd sat shell-shocked after my father's funeral, the same room where I'd explained our dire financial straits, the same room where I'd announced the initial investment in HomeSync. I have something to tell you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions roiling through me. HomeSync has been acquired by Intelligent Home Systems. The deal was finalized today. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Tessa, is that good news? Are you happy about it? I nodded, a smile breaking through. It's very good news, Mom, especially the financial part. I took a deep breath. After taxes and everything, I've received just over $1 million from the sale. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother looked as though she might faint. Olivia's eyes widened to the point of comicality. Max, who had been slouched in an armchair playing a game on his phone, sat up straight, his device forgotten. $1 million? My mom finally whispered. You're a millionaire? I guess I am, I said, the reality of it still not fully registering. And the first thing I want to do is take care of my family. That night changed everything. I outlined my immediate plans, paying off the remaining mortgage on our house, setting up college funds for Olivia and Max, establishing a retirement account for Mom, and moving us all to a newer, more comfortable home in a better neighborhood. I'd also be starting my new position at IHS in 2 weeks, with a generous salary that would ensure ongoing financial stability. The reactions were predictably enthusiastic. Mom cried and hugged me repeatedly. Olivia, who had been so resentful for so long, seemed genuinely happy for me, already talking about the car she might buy now. Max, typically nonchalant, couldn't contain his excitement about the possibility of transferring to a better college now that money wasn't an issue. In that moment, surrounded by my family's joy and relief, I felt a weight lift that I'd been carrying for 2 years. I had done it. I had steered us through the crisis, had found a way not just to survive, but to thrive. My father would have been proud. I was proud. I had no idea that I'd just set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately fracture our family in ways I couldn't have imagined. That the money which seemed like the solution to all our problems would create entirely new ones. That my role as family savior would eventually transform into something much more complicated and painful. But that night, all I felt was triumph and possibility. We ordered an extravagant takeout dinner, opened a bottle of champagne that Mom had been saving for a special occasion, and toasted to new beginnings. For the first time in 2 years, we all went to bed with hope instead of worry, with excitement instead of dread. It was the last time we would all be so unreservedly happy together. The changes happened quickly after that night. Within 2 months, I had purchased a beautiful colonial-style house in an upscale suburb of Boston. 5 bedrooms, a finished basement, a spacious yard, and a kitchen that made my mother weep with joy when she first saw it. It cost nearly twice what I'd initially budgeted, but the real estate agent had shown it to us on a whim, and everyone had fallen instantly in love. "This is our forever home," Mom had said, walking through the sun-filled living room, and I couldn't bring myself to say no. I paid cash for the house, establishing it in a trust that named my mother as the primary beneficiary, and Olivia, Max, and myself as equal secondary beneficiaries. I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, my family would always have a home, that they would never again face the fear of losing everything the way we had after Dad died. Olivia transferred to a private university to finish her degree, with me covering all expenses including a generous monthly allowance. Max moved to a well-regarded college known for its business program, living in a luxury apartment complex near campus rather than a dorm. Mom quit her job at the dental office, talking vaguely about taking some time to find herself before deciding what to do next. I started my new position at IHS, throwing myself into the work with the same intensity I'd brought to developing HomeSync. The role was challenging and rewarding, allowing me to oversee the integration of our technology into the company's broader ecosystem while developing new features and applications. I was well-respected, well-compensated, and genuinely enjoying my work. For a while, everything seemed perfect. We were a success story, the family that had faced tragedy and financial hardship but had come through it stronger than ever. When friends or colleagues asked about my family, I spoke proudly of Olivia's studies, of Max's new direction, of Mom's well-deserved retirement from the workforce. But beneath the surface, subtle shifts were occurring. The first sign came about 6 months after our move to the new house, when I stopped by unexpectedly on a weekday afternoon to pick up some documents I'd left at home. The house was a mess, dishes piled in the sink, takeout containers on the counter, laundry unfolded in baskets. Mom was watching TV in her pajamas, though it was nearly 2 p.m. "Sorry about the state of things," she said, not really sounding sorry. "I've been meaning to look into cleaning services, but I haven't gotten around to it." I frowned, looking around at the beautiful home that already showed signs of neglect despite being less than a year old. "I thought you were going to handle the household management," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "That was our agreement when you stopped working." Mom waved a dismissive hand. "I'm taking a mental health break. After everything we've been through, don't you think I deserve it? Besides, we can afford help now thanks to you." I bit back my initial response, which would have pointed out that mental health breaks don't typically last for months, or that the whole point of her quitting her job was to have time for household management. Instead, I nodded and said I'd look into hiring someone. Similar patterns emerged with Olivia and Max. Olivia's monthly allowance, which I'd intended for books, food, and basic living expenses, somehow never seemed to be enough. She called regularly, asking for additional funds for everything from study abroad programs to designer clothes to spring break trips with friends. When I questioned any expense, she would turn sullen. "I thought you wanted me to have the college experience you couldn't have," she'd say, her tone making me feel simultaneously guilty and manipulated. Max's spending was even more extravagant. He traded in the reliable used car I'd bought him for a brand new sports car, using money I'd given him for tuition and simply taking out loans instead. When I confronted him about it, he shrugged and said, "You're making bank now. What's the big deal if I have to ask you to cover some loans later?" That comment stopped me cold. "I'm not obligated to cover your loans, Max. That's not the arrangement we made." He looked genuinely confused. "But you're rich now. Why wouldn't you help your own brother?" This sense of entitlement, this assumption that my financial resources were communal property, became increasingly common in my family's attitude toward me. If I expressed any hesitation about an expense or suggested that perhaps they should consider costs before making decisions, I was met with variations of the same response. "Why are you being so stingy? It's not like you can't afford it." The dynamics began to shift in other ways too. When we gathered for holidays or family dinners, conversation inevitably turned to money. What they wanted to buy, trips they wanted to take, improvements they envisioned for the house. I found myself becoming the family bank, the source of financial solutions rather than a daughter or sister. My opinions on non-financial matters seemed to carry less weight. My own life experiences, unless they involved my work or money, were of minimal interest. One particularly telling incident occurred about a year after the acquisition. I had been dating someone, Alex, a software developer I'd met through work, for several months, and things were getting serious. I brought him to a family dinner, eager for everyone to meet him. Throughout the evening, my family barely asked Alex anything about himself. Instead, the conversation centered on what I had recently bought for everyone and what they hoped I would. Finance next. Mom talked at length about a kitchen renovation she wanted. Olivia about her plans for a graduation trip to Europe. Max about a startup idea he was considering and how much seed money he'd need. After we left, Alex was quiet in the car. "They see you as an ATM, he finally said as we neared his apartment. "Not as a person. Did you notice that no one asked about your work, or our relationship, or anything about you at all?" I wanted to defend my family, to explain that they were still adjusting to our changed circumstances, that they hadn't always been this way. But I couldn't deny the truth in his observation. The realization sat heavily in my chest, a cold weight I couldn't dislodge. The situation came to a head as my mother's 55th birthday approached. I wanted to do something special for her. She had been through so much, had kept our family together through the darkest days after Dad's death. Despite my growing concerns about everyone's relationship with money, I still wanted to celebrate her properly. I suggested a family vacation, perhaps to the Maine coast that she had always loved. But Mom had other ideas. "What I'd really love," she said during a Sunday brunch, "is a party, a big party, here at the house with all my friends and family, and—" She hesitated, then continued with forced casualness. "I've always dreamed of having a little country place, a cottage somewhere, quiet by a lake perhaps, for weekends and summers. I nearly choked on my mimosa. A second house? Mom, that's a huge expense, not just to buy but to maintain." "Well, it wouldn't have to be anything fancy," she said, though her eyes said otherwise. "Just a little getaway. I think your father would have wanted that for me. For us." The invocation of my father, what he would have wanted, was a tactic my mother had begun using with increasing frequency when she wanted something expensive. It was particularly effective because none of us could definitively say what Dad would have thought, and none of us wanted to dishonor his memory. I didn't commit to the cottage idea, but agreed to the party. I spent the next few weeks organizing an elaborate celebration, catering from Mom's favorite restaurant, professional decorations, a custom cake, champagne, and a string quartet for ambiance. I reached out to Olivia and Max about sharing the costs, thinking it would be a good opportunity for them to contribute. "I can't afford to chip in," Olivia said immediately. "I'm a student, remember? Besides, you're the one with money." Max didn't. even bother with an excuse. That's not in my budget right now. But hey, put my name on whatever you get her, okay? So I covered everything. Approximately $15,000 for a party that grew increasingly elaborate as my mother added to the guest list and refined her vision. I told myself it was worth it to see her happy, to give her the celebration she deserved. The night of the party arrived, the house transformed by twinkling lights, floral arrangements, and elegant table settings. 50 guests filled our home, enjoying the food, music, and atmosphere I'd created. My mother looked beautiful in a new dress, another gift from me, accepting compliments and well wishes with gracious delight. After dinner, as the cake was being served, Mom clinked her glass to give a speech. She thanked everyone for coming, spoke movingly about how blessed she felt to have such wonderful friends and family. Then she turned to address her children. "I want to thank my amazing kids for this beautiful party," she said, her gaze encompassing Olivia, Max, and me. "Olivia and Max, you've been so generous and thoughtful, planning everything down to the last detail." I blinked in confusion. Olivia and Max had done nothing, not contributed a cent, not helped with planning, not even assisted with setup that day. Yet Mom continued, praising their efforts and thoughtfulness, while I stood there, invisible despite having orchestrated and funded the entire evening. It got worse. As Mom concluded her speech, she smiled broadly and said, "And I have wonderful news to share with all of you. My children are giving me the most amazing birthday gift, a cottage on Lake Winnipesaukee. We're going to close on it next month." I couldn't be more thrilled. The crowd erupted in applause and congratulations while I stood frozen, champagne glass halfway to my lips. I had never agreed to buy a cottage. I had never even looked at properties. Yet somehow, my mother had not only decided this was happening, but had announced it publicly, making it virtually impossible for me to say no without humiliating her and myself in front of everyone she knew. I made it through the rest of the evening on autopilot, accepting congratulations for my generosity regarding a gift I hadn't agreed to give, watching as Olivia and Max basked in praise for a party they had contributed nothing to. When the last guest finally left, well after midnight, I remained in the kitchen, mechanically loading plates into the dishwasher as anger and hurt building inside me like a pressure cooker. "That was perfect," Mom said, coming in with another stack of dessert plates. "Everyone had such a wonderful time. I was thinking we could go look at the cottage next weekend. I've already been in touch with a real estate agent who specializes in lakefront properties." I set down the plate I was holding, afraid I might break it. "Mom," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "I never agreed to buy you a cottage." She looked surprised, then faintly annoyed. "But we talked about it. I told you it was what I wanted. For my birthday." "You mentioned it, yes. I never said yes. And I certainly never authorized you to announce it to 50 people as if it were a done deal." "Well, I just assumed. With everything you've been buying and all the money you have now, what's one more house?" She laughed lightly, as if my objection was a minor misunderstanding rather than a fundamental breach of boundaries. "That's not the point," I said, my composure slipping. "The point is that you made a major financial decision for me without my consent. And you thanked Olivia and Max for this party that they had absolutely nothing to do with, while treating my contribution as expected and unremarkable." Mom's expression hardened. "Why are you being like this? After everything we've been through. As a family, why are you suddenly being so selfish with your money? It's just things, Tessa. Just material things. What matters is family." "Yes, family," I agreed, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "Family is what matters. So why am I being treated like a personal bank instead of a daughter? Why? Is it okay for everyone to take and take from me but never acknowledge what I give? Why am I expected to buy everyone's affection with money?" That's a terrible thing to say. Mom's eyes filled with tears, tears that once would have immediately made me back down, but now only fueled my frustration. "We don't love you for your money. How could you think that? Because of nights like tonight, I said, gesturing around. The kitchen where evidence of my unacknowledged generosity was everywhere. Because you and Olivia and Max have come to expect financial support as your right, rather than as gifts I choose to give. Because you literally just tried to commit me to buying a second house without my knowledge or consent. As if summoned by the rising volume of our argument, Olivia and Max appeared in the doorway. They had both been drinking throughout the evening, and their expressions were a mixture of confusion and defensiveness. "What's going on?" Olivia asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Why are you yelling at Mom on her birthday?" "She's mad because Mom told everyone about the cottage," Max explained with exaggerated patience. "She doesn't want to buy it. She's being cheap." "I'm not being cheap," I snapped. "I'm setting a boundary. There's a difference." "Oh, please," Olivia rolled her eyes. "You've got more money than you know what to do with. What's the big deal about making Mom happy with a little cottage? It's not like you're using all your money anyway." "That's not for you to decide," I said, feeling a horrible clarity descending over me. "None of you gets to decide how I spend my money. You've all forgotten what it was like before, when we were struggling, when I was working 2 jobs and taking extra classes and supporting this household. You've forgotten that I earned this money through years of sacrifice and hard work." "Here we go again," Max groaned. "Saint Tessa, the great family savior. Are you ever going to stop bringing that up? Yes, Dad died. Yes, it was hard. Yes, you helped. But guess what? That's what family does. You don't get a medal or eternal gratitude for doing what any decent person would do." His words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my brother, my once sweet little brother who had cried in my arms at Dad's funeral, who I had helped with homework and driven to hockey practice and defended from bullies, and saw a stranger, an entitled young man, who had been thoroughly corrupted by access to money he hadn't earned. "You're right, Max," I said finally, my voice quiet now. "Family helps family, but it's supposed to be reciprocal. It's not supposed to be one person giving everything while everyone else takes it for granted." I looked at each of them, my mother, my sister, my brother. These people I loved more than anyone in the world, these people I had sacrificed so much for. And I made a decision that would change all of our lives again. "I'm not buying a cottage," I said firmly. "And starting next month, I'm cutting off all additional financial support beyond what I've already committed to. The house is yours, Mom. Your retirement account is set up. Olivia and Max, your education funds are established. But there will be no more allowances, no more random expenses, no more treating me like an unlimited resource." The shock on their faces would have been comical if it weren't so sad. They truly hadn't seen this coming, had truly believed that the flow of money would continue indefinitely, regardless of their behavior or attitude. "You can't be serious," Olivia said, her voice rising in panic. "I'm counting on that allowance. I've made financial commitments based on it." "Then you'll need to adjust your commitments," I replied, "just like I did after Dad died, just like all of us did." "This is punishment," Mom said, tears streaming down her face now. "You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt tonight. That's petty and cruel, Tessa." "No," I said, suddenly tired beyond words. "This isn't punishment. It's a correction. We've all lost our way, and I've been as much to blame as anyone by enabling behaviors that aren't healthy for any of us. I love you all too much to keep doing that." I left that night, returning to my own apartment in the city, a space I'd maintained even after buying the family home, sensing somehow that I might need a separate sanctuary. As I drove away, I could see them through the windows of the beautiful house I'd bought, still standing in the kitchen, their faces frozen in disbelief. The fallout was immediate and intense. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from all 3 of them, ranging from tearful apologies, mostly from Mom, to angry accusations, primarily from Olivia, to manipulative guilt trips, Max's specialty. I responded calmly and consistently, reiterating my decision and my reasons for it. This isn't forever, I told my mother during one difficult conversation. It's a reset. We need to rebuild our relationship as mother and daughter, not as patron and beneficiary. I don't even know what that means, she said, sounding genuinely perplexed. Why can't we be both? Why can't you be generous with your family? I have been generous, I pointed out. Extraordinarily generous. The house, the education funds, the retirement account, those are all significant gifts that most families would consider extraordinary blessings. The problem is that you've all come to see them as the baseline, as the minimum I should provide, with an expectation of ever more on top of that. Mom didn't have a response to that, at least not one she was willing to articulate, but her ongoing resentment was clear in her suddenly formal tone, in the distance that had opened between us almost overnight. Olivia took a different approach, attempting to bargain. Okay, I get it. We were taking you for granted, she conceded, about 2 weeks after the party. But can't we work out a gradual reduction? Maybe decrease the allowance over time so I can adjust my lifestyle? I considered this. It was the most reasonable request any of them had made, but ultimately declined. A gradual approach would just prolong the dependency, I explained. I think a clean break is better. You'll adjust more quickly than you expect. Easy for you to say, she muttered. You've got millions. Yes, I agreed. I do, but I lived on much less for most of my life, and so did you. You can do it again. Max simply stopped speaking to me altogether. My calls went unanswered. My texts received no reply. When we were unavoidably in the same space for a family occasion, he treated me with cold civility at best, open hostility at worst. I tried not to let their reactions sway me, though the estrangement was painful. I reminded myself that this intervention, because that's what it was, an intervention in an unhealthy dynamic, was ultimately for the benefit of all of us. That sometimes love means making difficult choices. That sometimes growth requires painful transitions. I threw myself into my work at IHS, channeling my emotional energy into developing new features for HomeSync. The technology was continuing to evolve in exciting ways, with applications expanding beyond simple energy management to comprehensive home automation and security. I received a promotion and a substantial raise, though the irony wasn't lost on me that I now had even more money that my family couldn't access. In my rare free time, I continued seeing Alex, whose perspective as an outsider to my family drama was invaluable. You're doing the right thing, he assured me during a dinner about a month after I'd cut off the additional support. It's not going to be easy or quick, but it's necessary. I know, I sighed, pushing pasta around my plate. I just miss them. The way we used to be before Dad died, before the money. We were happy then, weren't we? Even though we had less? Maybe, Alex said thoughtfully. Or maybe you're remembering it through a nostalgic lens. Families are complicated even in the best of times. Money just tends to magnify whatever dynamics already exist. His words stayed with me, prompting a re-examination of our family history. Had the seeds of entitlement always been there, just waiting for the right conditions to flourish? Had Dad's careful management of the family finances masked issues that would have emerged eventually regardless? Had my own need to be the savior, the responsible one, contributed to the unhealthy dynamic? These weren't comfortable questions, but they were important ones. As weeks turned into months, I continued my policy of financial boundaries while making consistent efforts to connect with my family on a personal level. I invited Mom to lunches, sent Olivia recommendations for books I thought she'd enjoy, texted Max about a hockey game I knew his favorite team was playing in. Most of these overtures were rejected or ignored, but I persisted. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. 6 months after the fateful birthday party, my mother called and asked if I'd like to come over for dinner. I'm cooking, she said, a note of pride in her voice. Nothing fancy, just lasagna, but it's Dad's recipe. That dinner was awkward but not hostile. Mom had indeed cooked. The house was clean, and there was no mention of money or additional support. We talked about safe topics, a movie she'd seen, a project I was working on, and parted with a slightly stiff hug. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Olivia was the next to show signs of adaptation. She had found a job at a marketing firm after graduation and had moved into a modest apartment with 2 roommates. When we met for coffee at her request, she surprised me by not asking for money. Instead, she had questions about budgeting, about negotiating a higher salary, about whether she should prioritize paying off student loans or building an emergency fund. "I've been doing some reading about personal finance," she admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "It turns out I don't know much about managing money. I never had to learn." "I can help with that," I offered, careful not to sound patronizing. "It's a skill like any other. It takes practice and knowledge." Max remained distant the longest, his pride apparently the most wounded by the withdrawal of financial support. He had been forced to downsize his lifestyle dramatically, moving from his luxury apartment to a basic dorm room, trading his sports car for a bus pass. When we finally did speak, nearly a year after I'd cut off the extra money, his resentment was still palpable. "I had to drop out," he said bluntly when I ran into him at Mom's house during a holiday. "I couldn't afford to stay at Wharton. I'm at community college now, living at home. Thanks for that." "I'm sorry it was so disruptive," I said, meaning it. "But the education fund is still there. It's enough to cover community college and then a state school to finish your degree. The money didn't disappear, Max. It's just not unlimited anymore." He shrugged, his expression guarded. "Whatever. I'm figuring it out." And he was, I realized. Despite his resentment, Max was adapting. He had found a part-time job at a local tech store. He was taking classes that interested him rather than ones that sounded prestigious. He was, perhaps for the first time, making his own choices based on his own resources rather than on what he could extract from me. As for me, the past year had been transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated. Freed from the constant drain of family financial demands, I had found space to explore my own interests and desires. I'd taken up rock climbing, joined a book club, volunteered at a coding workshop for underprivileged teens. I'd made new friends and deepened my relationship with Alex. I'd advanced in my career, earning recognition for innovations that had nothing to do with my family obligations and everything to do with my own talents and efforts. Most surprisingly, I'd found that I was happier with firm financial boundaries than I had been as the family benefactor. The weight of responsibility, of being the solution to everyone's problems, had been lifted, allowing me to relate to my family as a person rather than a resource. It was still a work in progress, still awkward and occasionally tense, but it was healing. On the 2nd anniversary of the acquisition and the beginning of my family's financial dependence, I invited everyone to dinner at a nice but not extravagant restaurant. To my surprise and relief, they all came. The conversation was somewhat stilted at first, each of us carefully navigating around sensitive topics. But as the evening progressed and the wine flowed, the atmosphere gradually warmed. During dessert, Mom cleared her throat and raised her glass. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, her eyes moving around the table to include all of us. "To family, to getting through hard times together, all kinds of hard times, and to my eldest daughter who had the courage to do a difficult thing out of love, even when none of us could see it that way." I felt tears spring to my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "Mom," she shook her head, cutting me off gently. "Let me finish. Tessa, you've always been the strong one, even before your father died. Sometimes too strong for your own good, taking on everyone else's burdens. What you did last year, setting that boundary, it hurt. A lot. But it was necessary. And deep. Down, I think we all knew it." "Speak for yourself," Max muttered, but there was a ghost of a smile on his face. "The point is," Mom continued, "we're finding our own strength now, and maybe that's what you wanted all along." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. It was exactly what I had wanted, for them to find their own capabilities, their own resilience, their own paths forward that didn't depend on my financial intervention. For us to be a family bound by love and shared history rather than economic advantage and obligation. After dinner, as we stood in the parking lot saying our goodbyes, Olivia hugged me, a real hug, not the perfunctory embrace she'd offered upon arrival. "I get it now," she whispered. "Why you did it. Thank you." Max maintained his reserve, offering only a brief nod and a "see you around." But there was less hostility in his eyes, less resentment in his posture. It was progress. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past 4 years, from the devastating loss of my father, through the struggle to keep our family afloat, to the unexpected windfall that had seemed like salvation, but had nearly destroyed us in a different way. I thought about how money, or the lack of it, had shaped so much of our family dynamic, revealing both the best and worst in each of us. The truth was, we were still finding our way back to each other, still learning how to be a family without financial dependence as the primary bond. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be perfect. There would be setbacks and disagreements, lingering resentments, and old patterns reasserting themselves. But for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope, not the temporary euphoria of a windfall, but the steady, sustainable optimism of genuine progress. I had saved my family twice now, first from financial ruin after my father's death, and then from the corrosive effects of entitlement and dependency. The second salvation had been harder, had cost me more emotionally, had risked relationships I treasured. But it had been necessary, an act of love disguised as rejection, a gift wrapped in apparent withdrawal. As I pulled into my apartment building's garage, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my mother. "Thank you for dinner, and for everything else. I love you." Simple words, but they meant everything. An acknowledgement, an appreciation, freely given rather than extracted or expected. I texted back, "I love you too, always," and I did. Despite everything, despite the painful journey we'd traveled and the difficult road still ahead, I loved my family fiercely. Not because of what I could give them or what they could give me, but because we were bound together by something deeper than money, stronger than circumstance, more enduring than either hardship or prosperity. That, I realized as I walked into my quiet apartment, was the true wealth I'd gained, not the millions in my bank account, but the wisdom to understand what really mattered. The courage to make difficult choices for the right reasons. The clarity to see that sometimes the most generous thing you can do for someone is to stop giving them what they want and start giving them what they need. I had been cast as both savior and villain in my family's story. Perhaps now, finally, I could just be Tessa, daughter, sister, person, not a bank, not a solution, not a problem, just me, with all my flaws and strengths, doing my best to love well in complicated circumstances. It was enough. It had to be.